Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's weekly wrap. It's 12:30 Friday afternoon, Friday the 13th, and Mirko joins me on the stream. How are you, buddy? How you doing?
Well, fortunately, we don't believe in superstitious numbers and whatnot because, we probably, we'd be too petrified to be online or leave the house today.
I was going to say, mate. I was going to say, are you a superstitious sort of a character, or are you just you're pretty relaxed about all these things, mate?
No, I'm just a black cat all round, really. It's all good.
I'm glad you've said it, mate, because you beat me to the punch. You definitely are a black cat, and looking rather dapper in your black top there, mate. So nice to see you on. Now, Mirko, it has been a tough week on markets, this one. We've bounced, we've done all types of things from that point of view, but it's pretty much been pretty dour, I dare say. Yeah, you want to give us a bit of an update?
Yeah, look, I think, going into this year, one of the things that we were pretty confident on and, always very risky to sort of make predictions and the like. But one of my predictions that we did make with plenty of confidence was that volatility was going to be here to stay heading into 2026, and we certainly haven't been let down on that front. And what we've seen this week, for example, just looking at some of the sort of the numbers and the like. So, like even in Australia, the All Ords this week, we had 2 days of one was up 1.97%, one was up 1.5%, and today we're currently down 1.4%. So you're sort of getting these significant price moves, which we don't like because that means volatility is here. Similar scenario in the US. We saw in the US the Nasdaq overnight had a -2% day. I'll talk a little bit more about that, and the S&P 500 was off 1.5%. Now, why has the I suppose market got the jitters, and what are some of the mechanics behind that? In Australia, in particular, we have started our reporting season, and it's certainly been a case of hit, you'll be rewarded, miss, you'll certainly be punished, and we've seen a couple of examples of that. And I mean, everyone's favourite mum and dad stock, CBA, reported this week, had a cracking half year. I think they were up 5.4 billion for the 6 months, and the stock actually jumped up, nearly 7% in the day. Turn that on its head, CSL had a miss, and the darling stock was off. I think over the course of 2 trading days, about 11% from that point of view. So, sacked its chief executive at the same time. So there was a lot going on, and because of an impairment, CSL were writing off 81% of earnings. Don't feel too sorry for them. They still made, I think, 400 million US for half a year. So it's not all doom and gloom, but it just goes to show how much the market is starting to punish those bits of data and information that we're seeing. But we'll continue to follow reporting season, and over the coming couple of weeks, we'll sort of share with you examples of some of the stocks that people are quite familiar with. And over in the US, looking at what happened last night in the Nasdaq, so US is nearly down 2% for the week, and the Nasdaq was off a couple of percent as we see a bit of a rotation out of the tech stocks, and we're starting to sort of see that more and more often, that people are starting to question the AI thematic, and realistically, with AI, what's actually happening there is there's been a huge spend from the tech sector in AI. A lot of it initially has been funded by cash flow, because some of these monsters that we talk about, like Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, Alphabet, their cash flows are just insane. So they can actually fund all of this. But now we're getting to the point where, and I saw an article the other day, that they believe that this year, those four stocks I just rattled off there will spend close to 700 billion US dollars on AI within their businesses. So for them, the logic behind that is that it's a race to get there first. I'm not convinced everybody knows where we're getting with it, but there is some sort of race going on to get there first. And but now what we're starting to see is that a lot of that funding is going to come from debt, and that's where the market's getting a little bit nervous. Yeah, when we start funding stuff with debt.
Yeah. Oh, look, mate. Thank you for that comprehensive update. And I think what has become clear is that if you hit target and you beat consensus, you're going to be handsomely rewarded, i.e., the Commonwealth Bank. And if you don't hit target from that point of view, you are going to get hurt. And CSL is a prime example of that. And we've, so much so that their executive, their CEO, actually resigned the day before.
Yeah.
From that point of view. So it's just showing you the market is pretty brutal at the moment. Interestingly, on that tech stop and on the rotation, I was just having a look as we were talking, and you look at a global company like WiseTech, which is based here on the Australian Stock Exchange and was a darling of the market for a long time and all that kind of stuff, and had a peak of $126, in the last 52 weeks. Today is trading at, $41.70, so two-thirds down in terms of where it's at. So, something like Zero, $196 a share, down to $72 a share. So it's been brutal in terms of the rotation out. So, look, I think for a lot of people, you just, obviously depending on where your position and so on, the good news for our clients is, we're not overly exposed to those areas from that point of view because we kind of always expected that this recorrection could come in. But it looks like it's coming home and it's coming home hard. So, you know, I
And I
think,
and I do think, Luke, that with that, just revisiting the quality aspect of things is really important because,
yeah,
I mean, some of those companies that we were talking about there with their big AI spends. I had a look at their sort of 6 month returns. Like a Microsoft's off about 24%, Amazon's down 10. I think Meta's down 15, 16% during that time. Not because people don't believe that they're good companies and the like, but purely because of the question mark, the cloud over tech, and sometimes they will, just sentiment will start dragging these stocks down. But it is important to sort of be able to look at portfolios and say, am I sitting on quality here? And if something was a fantastic company 2 weeks ago, why is it no longer the case? What's actually changed in that
yeah,
respect? So I think making sure that the portfolios have got that exposure to quality and are very conscious of exposures to particular sectors. And I think this is where perhaps the passive index type approach, where that your portfolio is dominated by a handful of stocks, probably carries a lot more risk than that basis of quality. And if you think about the Australian market, the only reason the market jumped up at one point, I think it was 5% on Wednesday, was because CBA released its results. It was a cracking result for CBA, but it's such a large weighting in the index, it just dragged the whole market up. Doesn't mean every stock went up, but that the weight of that stock took us upwards. So I think, yeah, again, we just need to ensure that the quality is there for our investors.
yeah. No, look, I couldn't agree with you more. I think, what's really important to remember in times like this from that point of view, particularly if you're overexposed from that end, is that you've got to sit back and go, markets go up, markets go down, and sometimes, on the upside, there's always that natural exuberance where markets overperform. And on the downside, there's also when markets underperform. So it's just something we just got to be mindful of. In saying that, we've also got to remember too that markets have been very generous over the last 2 or 3 years. So the companies that you mentioned, like Microsoft, and so on, and your Metas and whatever, they've gone up exponentially and doubled by, double, three times, four times value from that point of view, where they used to be worth $100 a stock and now they're $500, $600 a stock. So it was always going to give some back. And in some cases, and in Australia's case, we've seen it's been pretty brutal in Australia, not so much in the US at this moment in time, but it's just something for clients to be mindful of. And it just explains, A, why focusing on quality is really important. Two, why having a diversified portfolio really makes a lot of sense. And three, always managing to mandate. So, the good news for our clients is that this is something we always do. And this is the way we manage the money. So, that's been a positive. So, but look, hopefully, the market was probably due a week where it gyrates a little bit. So we've had that week. Hopefully, it doesn't extend into next. Now, on other issues, mate, and we will get into the new leadership of the Libs in a sec. But
What? We've got new leaders in the Libs? Go away.
we-
Surely we're not talking about the opposition.
again, but we'll talk about them in a sec. But before we go there, I just wanted to talk about Michelle Bullock for a sec. I watched her yesterday. She was in Senate estimates and she was being questioned by Matt Canavan, the senator, who made a point of, so his opening gambit was, Australia is in, we're in a terrible spot. Our country is falling apart. The world is collapsing around us. People can't afford to live. People can't afford to eat. And he was painting this picture of just sheer desperation, and then lent into that by saying to Michelle Bullock, like the Australian people don't like to be gaslit. And a couple of things that I kind of noticed, and to Michelle Bullock's credit, she actually pushed back and said, hang on a sec, I'm not gaslighting anybody. I know people are doing it tough. I understand people are doing it tough, but there are parts of our economy that are doing really, really well, and there are other parts of our economy which aren't doing as well. And I was thinking about what she said, and she's actually right. There are parts of our economy, and we've said this on the screen on numerous occasions. Things are going well, and there are other parts that aren't doing as well. But I'm looking at what Matt Canavan's doing, and I'm just looking at a lot of the stuff that happens on, Sky After Dark and on the news channels and whatever from that point of view. It seems like the Libs and the coalition and the opposition have gone down this Trumperian approach of, let's make it sound really terrible. And if we keep on telling people how bad it is, they'll eventually start to believe it. It's a bit like if you tell someone he's an idiot multiple times, he ends up believing he's an idiot.
Yeah, look, I'm not impressed with that at all, and I thought that was pretty unfair to sort of accuse, Michelle Bullock of gaslighting the public and actually leading them astray in that sense. What she has always maintained, and if anything, she's been easy on the government in terms of not talking about government spending, being one of the causes of sticky inflation. And she did go on to sort of clarify and say, yeah, there are parts of the economy that are doing so flush, but it's not all doom and gloom. And we've got unemployment at a real low at sort of low for 4.1%, I believe it is. So we've got low jobless rates, and yes, we're good on that front, but there are areas of the economy that are struggling, and she acknowledged that. So to sort of, I don't know what benefit you get by speaking to people in that manner. I think that's really unfair and quite unprofessional in truth. I think there's plenty of opportunities for some of these guys with plenty to say, but they don't say it at the right times. Like
Yeah.
some of the things that we hear on a day-to-day basis, and nobody questions them. Yet you're questioning someone that's actually highly educated, knows their job, and is actually doing the best they can with the tools that they've got as well.
Yeah. Look, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think what we've got to do here is we're just listening to the way the speak is going. And look, don't get me wrong. I have no problem with people having disagreements and having debates on policy. I think that's perfectly fine. Where I do have a problem is when you start making up stories and making things sound incredibly worse than what they really are in order to fulfill a political agenda that doesn't serve the public, doesn't serve the country, and if anything, is just built on sound bites. So your Instagram post or your X post or whatever crap you use makes you look like you know what you're talking about when you're really just talking bollocks. And I think politicians should know the impact that they have. And this populist approach that some on the right seem to be trumpeting, i.e., following the Trump route. Yeah, look, hopefully Australians are a lot smarter than that because it's a shame. But to Michelle Bullock's credit, and I do agree with you, I think she's doing a reasonably good job in tough circumstances. And yes, I agree, she probably has been lenient on the government. But in saying that, we all know how politics works. You've got to manage relationships as best as you can. So now let's talk about the new Liberal leadership, because one thing about this place is we can't, and I've got to give the Libs credit. They love to talk about themselves, and they're doing a really good job at doing that. So I guess the question here is, we've seen today that Angus Taylor has now been elected to the federal opposition leader. So congratulations, Mr. Taylor, well done. And we've seen that Jane Hume is now the new deputy leader from that point of view. So she's taken over Ted O'Brien from that end. And we've also seen that Susan Ley, who in theory inherited a poison chalice post the election, and for the last 280 days, from that point of view, has been trying to hold a fractured party together. We've just seen how brutal politics can be. Do you think this change is going to help the Libs, Mick?
Well, you'd like to think so, and they're talking about how it was a majority vote. I think it was 33-17.
I think it was high. I think it was 37 high. It was actually a little bit higher, so it wasn't a bad result.
So look, one thing the opposition actually needs and desperately needs is they desperately need some stability. So hopefully this will deliver that, and hopefully they can get on with doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that is holding the government to account and putting up a Fed income alternative.
Absolutely, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. It really is about stop this rubbish about trying to talk down the country at every minute. Stop this rubbish about telling things or saying things that aren't true. Yes, they might be truth. There might be some truth in part, but put things in perspective. But the reality is, you're right. Hold the government to account, and more importantly, come up with an alternative so we, the voters, actually have an opportunity and a chance to sit back and go, well, okay, we can make an informed choice when we go to the ballot box. Because at this moment in time, we don't have that. And at a federal level, you could probably argue and say the damage isn't yet there, but we're seeing the full damage of that here in Victoria at this moment in time, which brings me to this wonderful state of ours, Mirko. God, I love Victoria. What a great place to be. From what I understand, we've had $15 billion worth of rorting, which we all kind of knew, but apparently we needed someone to go and uncover all that sort of stuff. And we've had some bit of corruption in the big build, it looks like, from that point of view. And everything points back to Jacinta Allen, who was the Minister for Infrastructure and now the Premier. Surely heads need to roll.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck with that. Nothing to see here. It's only a rort if you're not involved, Luke. You know how this deal works, and unfortunately, I can't help think that it will be a case of nothing to see here. But let's see. It's and this is where the media actually can play a role, right? This is where they can actually start asking some hard questions and not sort of taking questions from a list that's been provided. So this is what you can talk about. It's like, no, we're media, we're journalists. This is what we're asking you about. Right? We're going to ask respectfully in that, but we expect to get some answers for the people that we represent. I haven't seen any of that. Let's hope that we actually do.
Look, I'm like you, mate. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, toes crossed, everything crossed. Just hoping that we might have some common sense finally emerge. I think, mind you, I do think this is an opportunity for Anthony Albanese and the Federal Labor Party. The reality is Victoria makes no money outside of stamp duty. Victoria makes no money outside of stamp duty, so it relies on the federal government to hand over GST revenues and the like. So this is essentially federal monies that we rely to keep this state functioning. So if I was a person handing over money from the federal thing, I'd be wanting to know and go, well, hang on a sec, is our money being used for good or for bad? And clearly the argument is it's being used for bad. So if I was Albanese, I would be saying, I'm going to withhold monies until we work out who's actually being corrupt from this point of view. And then in withholding those monies, I'm not going to hand over more monies until the people who are actually responsible for this actually step aside because they're not capable of leading. It would be nice to think that our federal government could do that, and it might actually reinvigorate our Prime Minister, but I think I'm hoping for too much, I dare say.
As the Prime Minister, you need to be careful what you say too, because then someone may actually hold you accountable at the federal level as well. So I think everyone's trying to look after their backsides and sort of go, hopefully this will go away. But it seems to be gathering a bit of momentum. So let's
Mm.
hope that the right outcomes apply because we certainly need those. Hey, I just double checked those numbers too. You're right. It was 34-17
34-17, there you go.
for Taylor. Now, you know me, they don't call me stats for nothing. Those 17 people that didn't vote for him, that actually represents a third of the party voting. So, the stability that you're hoping for, a third of your party doesn't actually want you in there. If when you look at it from a numbers point of view, let's hope they can put their egos aside and go, we're doing this for the party, and away we go. So yeah, it should be interesting times.
Look, mate, the Libs are clearly fragmented. You have what we would call the moderates, so the ones that sit probably in the centre, and then you have that Conservative that have probably a bit more of a right leaning, and there's various iterations of that right leaning. And Angus Taylor sits on that Conservative side. So I guess the concern that I've got there is he's part of the Abbott cohort and that group, and part of the Peter Dutton cohort. The Libs have gone to 2 elections on that basis and got absolutely smashed by the Australian electorate. The reality is, since Tony Abbott was in power, the Libs have lost 50 seats or plus 50 seats in metropolitan areas around the country. So my worry here is that the Libs are ticking off egos and a particular cohort, but not listening to the broader Australian public, and that's a worry. But look, Angus is new. Good luck to him. To Susan Ley, politics is brutal. Was she doing a great job? No, I don't think so. But did she deserve what she got? No, I don't think so either, because I don't think she was helped in any way or form. So it kind of just, it probably is an example of how bad politics is and why no one goes into it. Now, Mirko, 2 things I want to talk about. Apparently, we raise more tax on beer in Australia, and this is from David Pocock in the Senate's Estimate Committee yesterday, one of his questions. We raise more beer, I think it's 2.7 billion versus 1.15 billion in gas tax, which is the PPRT or whatever it is from that point of view, which is the tax that we would charge on foreign companies from that end. So we've got that incredibly long if we're charging more on beer than we are on gas, which we then repurchase back and pay 3 times over for. Surely to God.
It's actually un-Australian to be charging more tax on beer. Let's be honest. Yeah, even for someone like me that needs to find gluten-free beer, we're charging way too much tax. It's not good
Okay.
enough.
And by the way, to our audience who do listen to this podcast from time to time, Mirko has been identified as celiac, so which he has a condition, and we're all concerned for him and praying for him daily. But on this particular point, I did catch up with him recently. I saw him standing there with a gluten-free beer all by himself, and then proceeded to call him Scotty because he's got no mates.
And Scotty proceeded to drink, plenty of GF beers. It was a good day. It was a good day.
Good on you, mate. I'm glad.
I, I adjusted, but on a serious note, when you look at that and you watch the way that we let gas do the runaround around globally and how we end up buying it back, and it just the mind boggles. The mind actually boggles on this stuff.
The way I kind of sit back and think, why are Australians carrying the can here and we're paying overs for beers and doing whatever we're doing from that point of view? And I'm not a beer drinker anyway, but we're paying overs for something here from that point of view, and we're letting foreign companies take the gas out of the country, pay virtually nothing by way of tax, and then we're then importing it back in and paying overs and then saying we've got an energy crisis. We don't have an energy crisis, for God's sake. We've created it.
Yeah, that's more the point. We've created one, correct?
Yeah, no, we have. Now, mate, the final point, and just mindful of time, Australia's favourite, I would argue, business or franchise, Barbecues Galore, has gone into voluntary administration. Now, every Aussie loves a barbecue. So we've all probably ventured into a Barbecues Galore store. And it was always going to be one of those places where you don't go and buy a barbecue every year, but you do buy your utensils, you buy whatever from that end and whatever. But to see such an iconic brand go into voluntary administration, sign of the times, or just sign of consumer sentiment changing and us going to Bunnings and buying things there? What do you think?
Yeah, look, interesting. I think, there's 45, 46 franchises around the country for Barbecues Galore. So that would be a big hit. I know they're trying to work their way through that and hopefully, be saved and the like. Yeah, perhaps a bit of a sign of the times, and that's probably more along the discretionary spending. Yeah, when you're going out and updating the barbecue versus the old one that seems to still be, held together by the grease and the cobwebs. It's that could be seen as discretionary spending, and people maybe starting to pull back on some of that stuff as well. So could well be the sign of the times. I think that with a lot of these places, like those sort of retailers, their floor spaces are actually really big. So the rents are high and all that. So there's a few things going against them, but always sad to see an Aussie iconic business in a bit of strife. Yeah.
Absolutely, mate. And look, in the gun, we've got 500 employees directly from a barbecue galore perspective, and but you've also got to remember too the flow-on effect there too. Yeah, it's the manufacturing of all the extra products that come through. It's also the trucks that support the deliveries and all that kind of stuff. So you've got some major issues in that space where you kind of go, well, this is not just 500 people. This is going to have a flow-on effect, and it might be 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people impacted. And look, I'm a bit like you. I do think it's a sign of the times in the sense that I do think, there are parts of the world where it's getting harder. But I also do think that, from that end, you go into a homemaker centre now, you're starting to see a lot of free space in these homemaker centres.
Yeah, that's
You know,
right.
you know,
Exactly.
that American mall concept where malls are, were built and all of a sudden now they sit empty completely. Nobody going in there and and too expensive to knock down. So they're just leaving them there as dilapidated buildings. This is be careful what you wish for, I guess, from that point of view.
Yeah, very much so. Very much
Now,
so. Hey, before we wind up, we always touch on a little bit of sport. Have you been watching any of the Olympic Games?
mate, I have been. I'm absolutely addicted to the Super G and the downhill skiing. What those people do and the sheer speed, like 145 kilometers an hour with two pieces of wood stapled to your legs, and you're flying down these mountains that have got vertical drops of you know 12, 14 degrees. It is just nuts. And to their credit, I also saw Lindsey Vonn from the United States try something incredibly crazy with not having a knee or having done an ACL, and then trying to ski down a mountain, trying to ski down the very steep mountains that I was just talking about, and crash out and break a leg in multiple places. Just crazy. But I think we had some great news last night from the Aussies, I dare say.
Yes, we certainly did, and we had actually the first medal for Australia last night that we managed to jag, and we don't like mucking around in Australia, so we went straight with our first medal being a gold medal, and it was actually Cooper Woods in that sort of freestyle mogul skiing, and I watched that last night. It was actually amazing. Out of the 8 finalists, there were 3 Aussies in that final, so
Yeah,
there is a common theme here. Whenever Australia wins a medal in her Winter Olympics, it's usually sort of extreme freestyle, crazy stuff, right? And
yeah.
the moguls could only be described as that. So, congratulations to Cooper. I believe he's a Merimbula boy. So where he goes skiing, I don't know, but that just even makes the story even better. But yeah, pretty cool. And you're right, watching those skiers go down the mountain, watching these guys on the moguls last night. I'm actually embarrassed to say that I enjoy skiing. I enjoy sightseeing. That's what I'm going to be telling people, because what I do out there is not skiing when I watch what these guys do.
Mate, I'm hearing you, mate. I'm hearing it. It is staggering when you see what they do and the courage and yeah. And look. One thing I will say, Cortino in Milano, from that point of view, is what a beautiful part of the world. It is just you're looking at it. It's postcard perfect. It's beautiful. They've even had a lot of blue sky days. Might be look. It might be a perfect place to go for next February, Mick. Bit of a holiday, I dare say.
The facilities will be good.
Absolutely, mate.
We should
Absolutely.
what we should do is ski down one of those runs where the Super G, the slalom course goes down. Video that, and then do a cross sectional video of a real athlete coming down there. It'd be hilarious.
Mate, I do recall we were in Whistler there a few years ago, and we skied down the Upper Dave Murray, which is the part of the Super G part. And I remember skiing down it and being absolutely relieved when I skied down it, and someone had videotaped me, and I looked like I was skiing with Miss Daisy. Just this slow bloke that was going through it was just, yeah, it's kind of embarrassing, mate.
Too good. I love it.
Now, what have you got planned this weekend? Anything exciting?
Nice and quiet at my household this weekend. What about you?
And I think we've got the same, man. I think we've got a quiet one this week, and we had a crazy weekend last week. So just looking forward to just sitting back with a bit of luck. Might have a couple of glasses of wine, and a nice meal and just keep it nice and calm. So looking forward to that weekend. I'll be honest with you.
Bit more, armchair specialist commentary on the Winter Olympics coming up, I suggest.
I think so too, and I'm also looking forward to reading the that comprehensive report that came out on the big build here and the level of corruption. So
Yeah, I did see that doing the round, so it'd be
yeah,
interesting read. That's for sure. I'm not sure if it's the redacted report or the actual report, so we'll have to have a look.
redacted. I love that word. All
No
right, mate.
worries.
Well, look,
All right, folks. Thank you for joining us.
all the very best to everybody and to all our clients out there. Have a wonderful, cracking weekend. Enjoy yourselves. Enjoy the weekend. If there's a bit of sun, make sure you get out and enjoy that as well. To our wonderful team, as always, thank you. You're doing an incredible job. Nick, thank you for joining me today. And everybody, take care. Cheers, guys.
Hey guys.